Hey guys, welcome to today's video. In today's video, I will show you very quickly how you can use interceptor, the FlutterFlow interceptor, to solve many of your um, token handling process for your API calls, right? So let's assume you're using a custom backend like me. So this is a project I've built, right? So let's assume you're using a custom authentication, right? Because you have your own backend, right? So I'm going to walk you through what I did and how my own setup works, right? So I have my own backend, and when a user logs in, let me quickly show you that. When a user logs in, right? So this is a test user. When the user logs in, it returns two important data, which is the authorization code, which is the access token, and the refresh token, right? So this is more like a JWT. The access token is a JWT, and the refresh token is used for getting new access token every time for this user. All right, so let me show you my login page for you to understand what's going on, right? So remember those two pieces of data, the access token and the refresh token, right? So when the user logs in, we'll make an API call to our backend with the user credentials, and we store this credential. Very importantly, you have to look at this particular section. You have to store it in an app state, right? A persisted app state. You have to create an app state that is persisted. Let me show you that real quick. All right, so I have a couple of page states here, but the most important one is the authorization, auth token, refresh token, token expiry time. All right, so the auth token will make sure when you're creating it, you have to make sure it is persisted, right? Same thing with this, same thing with this. Now, let's go back to this flow here, right? So when the user logs in and our API call returns those information like the access token, right? So we store the access token in this auth token page state that we create, app state rather, that we created, right? And here is also persisted, right? So then we now call our actual login action, the default FlutterFlow login action, right? So I still decided that I was going to store the information here too, although I won't be using it in the app, and I'll show you why I won't be using it, right? So the interceptor, for some reason I have no idea how to access the this the variables in this authenticated user. I have no idea how to access it inside the custom action, so I had to stick with using FlutterFlow app state, because I mean, accessing your app state inside custom action is pretty straightforward, but I don't know how to do this here, so I had to use the app state for it. So here what we have done is we log in, we receive the access token and the refresh token, and we then store it in an app state so we can use it inside our interceptor, right? So what this interceptor does is you make an API call to your backend. Let's say you want to get a user information, but your API call requires authentication, requires you to send a JWT inside the authorization header, right? So your JWT token does not last forever, right? It can range from 5 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on how you set it when you're building your back end, right? So mine stays for at least 5 to 10 minutes, or 5 minutes. Let's just assume it is 5 minutes, right? So when you're making an API call, if that token has expired, you get an authorization failure from your API call. So what the interceptor does is, before you make an API call, the interceptor checks that token you are trying to pass to your API. It checks if it has expired. If it has actually expired, it generates a new JWT token, that's a new access token, and then passes that access token to that your API call you're making. So you never get to have issues with any authorization failure code or whatever, right? So that's what the interceptor does. So you can use interceptor to handle whatever logic you want to handle before making or after making an API call. The interceptor is really a powerful feature. Like, I had no idea how it works until I made a lot of research on it and tested it. Right, so let me show you what the interceptor is like. So when you come to your API call section in FlutterFlow and you like in my own case, I created a group, an API group, so I can manage all my settings at once, right? So inside this API group, right, so if you come to the advanced settings, you're going to see the interceptor here, right? So I'm using this interceptor to handle my token logic inside my API, right? So when you have there are a couple of FlutterFlow has a documentation for this, so you can go and read it out on their website. So I created the interceptor. The interceptor is actually a custom action. I'm going to show you that real quick. The interceptor is actually a custom action. Let me show you that real quick. All right, so this is the interceptor, the token refresh interceptor, right? So this is how it looks like. So what it does is, when you look at this URL here, what it does is I have an endpoint in my back end that you can use to refresh a token, right? So you just need to pass in your refresh token and it will come up with a new authorization token for you, right? So this is the endpoint. I provided the endpoint. So remember, when you logged in, the refresh token was saved, right? The refresh, you only did one refresh token, so it was saved in the app state that is persisted. And now our interceptor custom action can go there and get this refresh token and then use it. That is what it will now be using to refresh your authorization token whenever you want to make an API call. And now this custom interceptor, this token refresh interceptor, right, what it does is, if it refreshes a JWT token, it stores it in the auth token app state we created, right? So when you make an API call like this, hold on a bit, when you make an API call like this, like the way I'm making here, right, we can now, when we want to pass in the authorization, the JWT, we can now go and get it from our app states. Remember, our interceptor refreshes the JWT token and stores it in the app state before we make an API call. So whenever this API call wants to be called, it always goes to the app state to get this. Now, what happens is, what this interceptor does is, your app state, the app state that stores this auth token, always holds a valid token, always, right? It always holds a valid token, because before you make an API call, our interceptor already makes sure that, all right, this auth token is valid, you can go ahead with your call, right? So the job of the interceptor here in my own case is to make sure that my authorization token has not expired before an API call is being made. That's just what the interceptor does. So you can use this to actually handle token logic in your app, right? So another issue I had when setting this up was, I still was not able to achieve a persisted authentication throughout my app. Like, I do not want users to always, whenever they open their app, they have to log in every single time, right? I was not able to achieve that, because for some reason, when you close the app and open it, you still have to log in, right? Because the authorization token only gets refreshed when there's an API call. So what happens when there's no API call? It expires, right? It actually expires, and FlutterFlow just automatically locks you out. So there's a way to handle that logic, right? So I created a splash screen, and with a blank screen, and on page load, what I did was, I first of all check if refresh token is set, right, which is our app state. If the refresh token is set there and navigates, I just assume, like, we are letting the app know if there's a refresh token, then this user should always be logged in. We don't have a problem with that, right? Then if not, take the user to the welcome screen, right? So this is now our entry page, because when you come here, you have to set it here as your entry page. right? So you have to set it as your entry page, right? So when you open your app, this is what FlutterFlow first of all, you know, reads from, and then it takes you, right? So that is it. So with this setup, you'll be able to, I mean, for those using custom backend, with this setup, you'll be able to achieve a proper token handling in your API calls, and you'll be able to achieve a persisted authentication throughout your app for your users, because most times it can be annoying when you have app that you have to log in and log in and log in every goddamn time you open the app, right? So this is not the case here. You'll be able to handle your token more gracefully and better with this. All right, so um, you need to go and check out the API interceptors. I'm sure a lot of people are not using this, but this is really, really, really very powerful. All right, guys, so that will be all for today's tutorial. See you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Bye.